Welcome to part 3 of Rewilding the Feminine. We're going to get started in just a second. Just getting situated. Okay. So we are going to start today, as we have the last 2 sessions, with a bit of a grounding exercise. And this one is one of my favorites. Again, it's just kind of another simple way to rely on our breath to bring us back to the present moment and we're going to activate our vagus nerve, call on our parasympathetic nervous system to help calm us, center us into this space. I know I need it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And this is a tool that you can use anytime. It's perfect, especially when you're out and about, because no one has any idea that you're doing it. So this is called an extended exhale. And what you're doing is breathing in for a count. So it might be 3, it might be 4. You're holding it for about that same amount, 3 or 4, and then extending the exhale longer than the inhale was. So for example, if your inhale is 4 and you're holding for 4, then your exhale, you would try to be 6, 7, maybe even 8 if you're able to. And what I find is that when we sit down and we start our first breath, we're still kind of getting situated. We're working out the kinks. So you might be breathing in for 3, holding for 2, maybe exhaling for 4, feels wonky. By the time we get to the third breath is really when we settle in. And that's really when the vagus nerve says, yes, I'm here. I'm going to calm you down. I'm going to hold you and we're going to chill. So by the end, usually you could be doing 4 or 5 for your inhale, 4 for your hold, and then 8 for your exhale. So just wherever you're at today, as long as you can maybe get 1 more count to extend your exhale past your inhale, you're doing great. So let's do this together now. Let's start with breathing in for 3. So 2, 3, hold for 3. That exhale may have been 4 or 5. So let's try again. In for 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale out your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll go in again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if we can. And the next one we're going to do on our own so I can get 1 breath in. I like that. I hope you do too. It's one of my favorites. Again, simplicity is perfect. It's gold, and it's, I think, where we're going to find our sanity. So there's a super simple practice for you, which is perfect for today because I wanted to start before we get into the real content of today, which is boundaries and kind of wrapping up rewilding. Something that keeps coming up for me in the last couple weeks, really hit me hard today, is a need for softness and a desire for softness and seeing softness as a portal to peace. And so what I mean by this is we are very much in our modern world, living in our masculine energy. And again, we talked a bit about the difference between masculine and feminine in our first call. So again, that masculine energy is really what gets things done. And in some ways, if we're looking at it kind of as that duality of masculine and feminine, that masculine is kind of the hard energy. It's logical, it's linear, it gets stuff done, it's, progress, produce, move forward. Sometimes it's, forcing. And it's usually can feel like more of a constraining energy to have. So it's the one that if we're living predominantly in that space is going to lead to stress and burnout because we're not balanced with the flow and the creativity and support and softness. And so softness for me is something that complements wellness goals very well. Because oftentimes, especially with the way that the diet industry and kind of now this interesting trend that we're seeing in the wellness industry, it can be an added stressor and it can be a process of just more confusion and more pushing and more in our dominant masculine energy, because we're trying to do all the time and we're trying to fix. And in some ways, the awareness of health and our own well-being has swung the pendulum a bit to now it's just an obsession with health, and now we're preoccupied with health. And awareness is great and a wonderful tool, but when we're obsessing, we're counteracting the benefits of the practices and the well-being that we could be feeling and experiencing with just more stress because we're trying to do in order to feel better. And so softness gives us space. It allows us to calm down for a moment. If we could soften our bellies, then our digestion works better. If we can soften our hearts, we can meet people with more compassion. We can meet our children with more compassion. We can walk through the day instead of feeling kind of braced for what will come, just kind of soften and let it come. And then as it comes, we have better access to the solutions and the resources that we would need to handle what comes up, the stress, the situations, the demands on us, the expectations. If we're stressed, we can't access, literally, our brains cannot access the resource part of ourselves where we know where the solutions are. Because our resources, as we talked about last week, are being diverted to just dealing with the stress. And so other systems are lacking those resources. And so, anyways, the benefit here and kind of the point of cultivating some more stillness is in creating more space for our inner knowing and our intuition to come forward and really lead us down our individual paths of healing and wellness. And so I invite you to find moments of stillness throughout your day, because especially if you're living in a place where you are in your more dominant, or you are feeling a lot of stress, or you're even maybe in burnout and just total depletion, moments of softness can be very beneficial and can be have more of a transformative effect, I think, than you may even realize. 2-3 times a day, if you can pause and do that extended exhale, and as you're exhaling, really feel the release, allow the release of your stomach and your belly and your abdominal muscles. It's something that I think as women, I know I carry it around and I know others do too. We constrict, we suck in, we're trying to be smaller. I think there's a little bit, even unconsciously, of an awareness of how much space we hold in the core of our bodies. And so if we can release a little bit, feel our stomach release as we exhale, that's a great way to start softening from the core and softening really from the core of who we are, as that is our womb space as well. So leave you with that, just a few thoughts on softness, because I'll be continuing, I think, to work that into upcoming programs as well. So let me know your thoughts on that. If that kind of helps you, if it meets you where you are, if you find it interesting, if it's just totally outside your experience and you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'd love to hear that as well. So our topic today is boundaries. Boundaries are a funny one because they are something that animals instinctively know. They have an innate ability to know their boundaries. They know when they've wandered to an area that's inhospitable, that's not suitable for their needs. It might not have the right food. They might be in a predatory area. They turn back. They try, if they can, in the wild, to return to the terrain that supports them the best. Sometimes they're blocked by human intervention, but they do try, and their goal and their instinct is to return to the safe place, the boundary, and the home, the habitat that they know will support them. This is also true for us as well. And I think we do need to remember sometimes that humans are animals as well. We may have evolved to a different place, and we may think we're, the highest beings. And I'm not going to discount that. That's a whole nother conversation. But the point is that we are just as closely connected to nature as animals are if we allow ourselves to be, which is kind of what this whole process of rewilding is. It's returning us to that uncultivated landscape within ourselves. And so this is true for us as well, that we do have an instinct for where our boundaries are. But modern life has made it increasingly difficult, I believe, to be aware of and to enforce our boundaries. And depending on where you're at, you may not have any awareness of what your boundaries are. Maybe you don't even know when they've been crossed. Maybe you're hearing the word boundaries and you're like, I don't get it. I don't know what that means. What does that look like? One of the easiest ways to identify where you need a boundary, or maybe where a boundary has been crossed, is to look at resistance. Where in your life do you feel resentful? Is there a relationship you're resenting, someone's actions, someone's words? If you've lived with this for a long time, you may not even recognize it as resentment. But if we can look at our relationships and see maybe where do we feel constricted, again, we're going to rely on our stillness and continue to cultivate that relationship and that communication with our inner knowing. We sit for a moment and look at any area of your life where you feel constricted. If you feel resentment, if you feel depleted, drained, stuck. Sometimes we can identify these really easily. We're like, God, work is so draining. It's demanding. It's depleting me. How would I even set a boundary with work? Sometimes these boundaries are going to come from us first, that we have to set a boundary around how we're spending our time. Maybe we need to set a boundary around our thoughts, what thoughts we let in, what thoughts we allow to take root, what thoughts we allow to kind of circle and play on repeat. So our work today is very simple, and it is going to be just going back to our inner knowing for guidance on where we need the boundaries. And then the next step will be identifying kind of what those boundaries would be, but we have to know where we need them first before we can really address anything, because awareness and willingness has to be the first step. So as I said, this could be applied to relationships. It could be specific situations, places, feelings, or thoughts, again, that you have about yourself. And this could be a whole series in itself, but I think we could all benefit from a boundary with our inner critic, not letting the inner critic run the show, maybe giving it 5 minutes to say its piece, and then wrapping it up and saying, I'm not giving time and energy to this role in my life anymore, or this persona. Maybe sometimes I think of my inner critic, I like, give her a face and a name and kind of a personality and stuff. And I say, she gets 5 minutes. Maybe she does have something important to say. Maybe something that she says could help me redirect my energy or my actions. But then at the end of it, I'm going to shut it down and kind of wrap it up. And honestly, in my head, and I find this, I'm a visual person in some ways. And these are the places that I find it very helpful to visualize. Physically, in my mind, this person that I've created, this inner critic, and after she's had her piece, shaking hands, saying, thank you for your contributions, and I've got it from here. And then I'm visually watching her walk away. And that kind of shuts it down, puts an energetic boundary between me and my inner critic. And so this is just an example with inner critic, but you could do it with anything. If there's a relationship where you need boundaries, maybe at the moment you don't feel strong enough, maybe safe enough, ready to set a boundary with the person. Maybe you don't feel equipped yet. There can be some resistance maybe to not feeling like you have the resources or kind of the know-how to set a boundary with someone, a loving boundary with someone, especially if you've been in it for a long time and it's tricky. You can kind of work through a little bit of a boundary with yourself first so that you're addressing your side of the street before you go and kind of approach a conversation with somebody. So you can say and visualize maybe that person in your mind. Think about if there's a specific situation where they crossed a boundary. You can say to yourself, even hold it as an object. Sometimes I think that's helpful, is to say, see it as a thing that you can hold and say, this box that's filled with the thoughts from this person, I am putting it in here and I'm not letting it come into my bubble, my energetic space. What they're going through, what they said to me, how they crossed this boundary, that has more to do with them than me. And before I address it with them, I'm going to keep it out here so that I can, from a more impartial standpoint, address it with them later. So I hope this is making sense, that we're separating ourselves and how we perceive stressors or how we perceive a crossing of boundary as something a little more neutral, and that it's not an attack, and we can put some space between it so that when we set the boundary, we're doing it lovingly and we're doing it from a place of respect and honoring the situation and anyone else involved in it. Let me know if that's making sense. If it's not, I'd love to work through your personal examples if you have questions. And of course, if you're catching the replay, please email them to me. I'd love to help you out in there as well. Because we really do need to be aware of our boundaries, know where we need them, and then create them with love so that we can feel more safe and secure in our own terrain. That's really what this is about, is making sure that we are honoring our bodies, our wisdom. And the way that we do that is by knowing what our boundaries are so that we can stay in the place that is safe and secure and hospitable for us to grow and continue to thrive. So when we're in our homes, we feel safe. Hopefully, we're very privileged if we do. We feel secure. We feel relaxed, hopefully. If this is not your experience, of course, I offer lots of compassion. And if you need assistance, please reach out, because it's not everyone's experience to feel safe and secure in their homes. But if you do, that's wonderful. And then the work of rewilding, kind of this regular communing with your inner knowing, cultivating stillness, grounding to the earth, setting boundaries, then we can all contribute to and lay the foundation for calming your nervous system so that you can feel the same security, safety, and grounding when you're out in the world. So while it seems like, especially in the last two calls between stillness and grounding and really connecting to the earth and kind of these practices that really ask us to go inward, it can seem maybe after a while like a lot of this is self-evolving and self-centered. Not the self-centered term that you're thinking, but really putting the self at the center of everything we're doing. That is required in order for us to be able to show up in the world with more compassion, with some forgiveness, with a willingness to see others as human too, And I think that's incredibly important in our current landscape and climate, is to be able to walk outside of our house, not suited up and not looking to change anyone. We're going out with a steady, grounded sense of who we are and our presence. And that in itself is a peaceful contribution to the world. I have so much more to say about that. So that's why I'm kind of trying to keep it down a little bit, just because I don't want to spend the whole time, as we're supposed to be rewilding, kind of getting into the more global impacts. So we've spent a little bit of time here in boundaries. I hope it was helpful, because I do feel like boundaries, oh, they're a huge thing. There are books, tons of books for a reason, articles, podcasts. I mean, it's a thing now in our society to need strong boundaries, to know our boundaries, to be able to enforce our boundaries. So today is really just a taste of why we need boundaries and how we can start to identify where we need them, and then maybe even start to put them into place. But this work of boundaries and the work of grounding and the work of stillness and connecting to our inner knowing is really the work of, I believe, a lifetime. I'm only 33. I will admit my innocence and maybe my naivete at this stage in my life. But I'm also one to learn from others. And I don't need to learn the hard way. I love getting the benefit of other women's wisdom and older people. And I've seen it time and time again that the more we want to grow, the more we want to evolve, the more we want to embrace the things that we don't know, the more the more unfolds before us, and the more exciting and fun and full this journey can get in the best way. So this series, I hope, really serves as a cracking open for you, showing you maybe what's possible, giving you a taste of an inner dialogue, giving you a taste of how great it can feel to reconnect to the earth, maybe after a long time away, maybe after a lifetime away. If the last time you really connected with nature and trees and walking barefoot through the grass might have been when you were a child, getting back to that childlike time of play and freedom and connection, that's also a great part of rewilding. We were kind of uncultivated, rich, wild as children, because we didn't yet have all the constraints that society can put on us, especially as women. They may have started to trickle in already. I think they do start from birth, finding out the sex of your baby. But as children, that's as close as we're going to get to that freedom. And so anytime we can return to a little bit of that childlike connection to nature and wonder and spirit, I just think that's magic. And I do feel like that's a little bit of a tangent. So let's get back. So we're going to circle back a little bit to session one, our first call. So where can you go from here? So I think the most important thing that we can do, and I think we've done a good job of keeping this the focus, is really continuing to check in with your inner knowing and cultivating that stillness, because she is the one that's going to tell you the next steps to take. She is the one that's going to tell you where to direct your attention and where to focus. Maybe you sit down and you're thinking about boundaries, grounding, stillness. And these words might just be kind of muddling around, and then maybe you'll hit one. Maybe you say boundaries. And maybe all of a sudden, oh, something opens up a little bit. Something in your belly kind of niggles, like, that feels like maybe an area we need to explore a little bit more. And that's kind of where you get your next steps and where you're supposed to go from here. Continue to meet yourself with curiosity and willingness and awareness of the things that are pulling you away from your wild, from your true nature, from your ability to connect to your true nature and to your outer environment. Paying attention and bringing awareness to the things like that, the things that are taking you away, that are distracting you. When, and where do you feel constricted? Because those are the messages, those are the signs of your inner knowing telling you this isn't right, this isn't true for you, and we need to do something about it. And knowing what to do about it won't always come right away. Maybe you do know. Maybe you know a resource, maybe you know a friend, maybe you know the next step, but maybe you don't. But if you can sit with this idea of whatever it is that you're supposed to do next, wherever it is you're supposed to follow, maybe it is boundaries. Keep yourself open to that idea. And then the resources and the people that you need will come to you. Your eyes will be opened looking for something different than you had been looking before. And the path will become more clear. I hope that makes sense and I hope it helps. Another thing I want to talk about is how Mother Nature is really a beautiful mirror for us as far as what is possible. And I think she acts as a great guide for us. So if you're feeling stuck about maybe the next steps of rewilding, maybe the next steps of grounding and really getting in tune and maybe cycling with nature a little bit more, is working with the seasons. And, in the summer, it's a little more energetic. We're out more, lighter foods, things like salads and melons. And, we're probably hydrating a lot more just because that feels good, and we're hot and we want ice water. Letting the seasons guide us is also a great way to connect with nature. To eat seasonally is to really enjoy nature and connect to it that way. In the fall, being out, getting a little bit more rest, maybe starting to incorporate kind of soups and different seasonal foods that come out in the fall. Starting to gather with people and kind of have more intimate gatherings and connections. And then in the winter, again, warming foods, comfort. If you feel that need for hibernation, I sync with the seasons a lot, where in the winter, I am totally accepting and fine with spending an extended amount of time on the couch or in bed or under blankets, just wherever I can get some comfort and warmth and relaxation and rest. And for a few years, I didn't understand it. And I kind of gave myself a guilt trip over it, that like, oh, I'm just so unproductive in the winter. And I just want to sit here with my tea and I want to read great books and, just really hibernate. And once I kind of started working more with the seasons and with nature and feeling more grounded, I just started to feel the greatest peace. Because for me, it settled in like, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to be. This is fine. This is how I cycle. I hibernate. And then in the spring, I'm massively creative. I get tons of energy to do new projects and to start things. And that's really my blooming season. And then in the summer, I have a little relaxation. I have a lot of fun. Things just flow. The days feel so long. I get lots of energy to kind of take the seeds that I was planting in the spring and bring them forward. And this is really just to illustrate for you how we can work with the seasons and how we can see the seasons and Mother Nature as a mirror for our own energy to maybe kind of take off a layer of expectation that we're just supposed to produce and be kind of always in the what's the word I'm trying to think of, maybe like always in the harvesting season, like we're just always supposed to be, just moving and producing and progressing, and that's just not the way nature is either. That's giving me an idea now for a whole nother series. So let me know if you resonate at all with kind of the seasonal way of looking at things. Because I think as women, we are so much more in tune with that. And even as far as things like seasonal affective disorder, sometimes I think there's some misinformation as far as wanting to turn more inward in the winter, and wanting to embrace a lot more rest. I think in our modern times, we might even want to embrace it just so much and shut down for the winter. And I think that's okay. So a lot of rewilding is also just saying, like, asking yourself, what's true for me? And separating what's a societal expectation? What is some misinformation maybe that I received that doesn't fit me? So again, some brief advice that I would leave you with is just following what feels good and what feels true for you and keeping it simple, because it really doesn't need to be complicated. So rewilding the feminine, it's all about intuition, trust in ourselves. For so long, we've put trust in others almost from the day we're born. And while that, of course, serves a purpose when we're vulnerable babies, of course, we put our trust in our caregivers. But we continue to put our trust outside of ourselves as we grow. And that's when we start to lose our power, our feminine intuition, our capacity to know with confidence what is right and true for us. Once we can reconnect, reclaim, remember that we do know best. We have it within us. We have everything we need. We are smart. We are resourced. We know ourselves better than anyone else is ever going to know us. And we know what is true for us. And that is what rewilding is really about, is this possibility of trusting your own inner knowing every step of the way. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. I've seriously enjoyed doing it. It's probably one of the most fun things for me is teaching and being in this capacity, in these types of containers with you. If you haven't been able to join live, I hope at some point we do get to kind of either virtually meet or even meet in person, as I'm starting some of the events up in the fall. So please stay connected. If you'd like support, I do have a Facebook group. So please reach out for that. If you'd like to join, we're still kind of getting things kicked off in there. It's a small group at the moment. But I would love for that to become kind of a home for women to connect, to share more content, hop in live, and help you guys out. So if you would like to join the Facebook group, please just reach out with an email. We can get you in there. Please let me know, honestly, all your feedback for this series, because it really does inform what I do going forward, how I teach, what I teach, figuring out what works and what doesn't. So I really value your feedback. And I value you spending your time with me. I feel very honored that we have been able to spend this time together, whether we're live or on the replay. Time is sacred. And so I really feel privileged that you have spent your time with me over the last 3 weeks. And I hope we get to meet again. But if we don't, I wish you the best on your rewilding journey. And have a fabulous summer. Good evening.